Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our monthly speaker series, where our friends and neighbors share their life stories. Today we welcome Ed Warner, who is my friend and neighbor on Shoreline Drive. A little facts about Ed. Ed was born, reared, and educated in Washington, D.C. He graduated Catholic University with a degree in aeronautical engineering. Ed's varied career as a corporate executive encompasses living in 14 different cities, pursuing a career starting with General Electric and ending as Chief Operating Officer at Colt Industries, Hartford, Connecticut. Ed is married to Linda Warner, who unfortunately is not here today. I will let Ed continue on his amazing story as a corporate executive. Please join me in welcoming Ed Warner.
Thank you, Lee. Is this on now, working? Everybody can hear okay?
Yep.
I have so many wires on, if lightning strikes, I'm a goner. So, Lee covered the basics of my life up to college and so forth. I'd just like to add a couple things. I was born and brought up in Washington, D.C., and I don't know how familiar you were in the 90s or back in the 40s in Washington, D.C. Different city completely. In the summertime, a small town, nothing happened. In the wintertime went nuts with all the politicians and their supporting there and so forth. So it was quite different, quite safe, and a great place to grow up, really. I got into Catholic University for two reasons. I just happened to hit an application when I got out of college for their new aero engineering school, and they had one opening left. That was one of the years when all the vets, and I'm not a vet, missed it by 1 year, were looking for college openings and so forth. But I happened to get in that. Also, I happened to be one of the 40 heathens. At Catholic University would take 40 non-Catholics in each year to make sure that the Catholics understood how evil other people were and so forth. So we did our best to prove how evil we were. But anyways, there was no effort to convert us or anything like this. It was just that they wanted the mix, and so we helped them get the mix. So, but anyways, I went on through college. When I came out in 1951, there was offers galore. We all had offers from companies we never even heard of, because there was a build-up in 51 in that period after the Korean War, and we're converting over to new armaments, and everybody was looking. I chose to go with General Electric because they offered a big training program for all the new engineers coming in. And so we decided to go out. I was married at that time. We decided to go out to Cincinnati and join them. So off we went, and I owed $500 on my car, and I had $500 cash in my pocket. So that was the start. And the place we rented was $100 a week. No, excuse me. The income, the salary was $101 a week. That's what we got for 40 hours or 45 hours, whatever it was. So it was starting at the bottom, but life was good at that level. And there was enough people there so that you were mixed at the same level you could mix with and enjoy yourselves quite a bit. So anyways, I'll start with this picture of a guy standing on a huge roof holding a dead chicken. And that was the start of my career. When I got to Cincinnati, I was supposed to go into the nuclear aircraft end of things. They were going to build an airplane driven by a nuclear engine. But before I got there, they said this was silly. There's no way they could keep people up in the air for days and days without a bathroom, so they canceled the whole program. And so I was shuttled over to their aircraft engine part, which was part of the whole thing. And the first day, the fellow that was going to run the orientation for all of us new engineers was not available. So they sent us out to just kind of fill in on other jobs or look and observe. I was sent up on the roof where there was a little oasis, a couple of umbrellas, and three refrigerated tanks, just beer cases or beer, whatever you call it. And they had marked A, B, and C. And I said, what in the world are we doing up here? He says, we're throwing dead chickens down the stack here. And I said, for what reason? He says, because birds stop up these engines. And you'll remember recently the plane that had to land in the East River? That's the same problem. They have never solved it completely. Enough birds in those engines, the engines stop and the plane goes down. So anyways, that was started. It was 2 days up there in the heat and just waiting for them to radio up, throw a chicken down the stack. But they learned later on how to do it with a catapult down below, and much more accurate and faster and so forth. But so anyways, if you just a minute, I'll tell you a little bit about this program that we went into. General Electric at that time would bring in maybe 50 or 60 engineering trainees. They would put them all over the company, different jobs in different places. Jobs, learning jobs. But they would get us together once in a while for executive training, if you will, this type of thing. And so it was a great place to start. And it was a great company. They were just breaking up the old fashion company where you had these huge conglomerates of products being made in Schenectady, Syracuse, Erie, Philadelphia, and a couple other places like that. One man was the king of that place. Nobody argued about anything except with that one guy. And he was just the ruler. It didn't work too well. They could not get any separation between products. Like in, I think, Schenectady, they built in one place hair dryers and hair curlers. The other place, giant turbines, all run by one guy. How could he concentrate on one without the other? We did like a couple of turbines with hair dryers built in, but that was just a mistake. But anyways, so Ralph Cordner, the president at that time, chairman, was breaking up the companies, and he would take and identify one business and send it separate out into the boonies someplace. Morrison, Illinois, Decatur, Illinois, all over the country, these new businesses were popping up, so he could separate out and measure each one of these businesses instead of this big jumble that he had to look at. So it was a good time because there was a lot of businesses started, and they were really lacking good management because all of a sudden they had many businesses to manage except one big business. And I want to tell you this, that the guy that ran Schenectady, for instance, the whole works, was great at shifting overhead around. If you went in to look at how profitable this business was, he'd shift all the overhead on the books over to another product. Then you turn around and look at that one, it was all shifted someplace else. So it always looked great, but the bottom line, that was another problem when it got trapped to show the whole thing. But anyways, back to the guy on the roof, and if we can do it. There we go. Well, okay, we'll just jump over here. Here's jet engines. Now, our first job as test engineers was to go out. This is the inside of that fancy cowling that you see, and the engine is inside of this, where the fire is and the thrust and so forth. Our first job as trainees was to go in there and grope that engine. You grope that engine. Yes, we had to feel by our hands all over that engine while it was running at idle speed, looking for leaks, air leaks. And they were always 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 in there. So that was the job, to feel around this. I had the front left corner, he had the front right corner and so forth. And then they would send it back to the shop for the tightening up and so forth. Well, one day I was sitting at the control panel waiting for the test to be run before we could go in and check it out. And I happened to notice a piece of newspaper there, and it was fluttering like this. And I walked around and I couldn't feel anything, a little tiny breeze maybe. So I said, listen, what I'm going to do is I cut a couple of strips off that newspaper, and I went into the engine when it was ready to check, and I dragged it over the top of the engine, my section. And we come to a little leak, the thing would flutter like this, and I could find it. I finished my part of the quarter of the engine in about 1/10 of the time, and I found every daggone leak in there. So I thought it was pretty good. Then they had a test, big guy, Finger was his name. What the hell are you doing? dusting off the engine? And I said, no, sir, I'm just trying this out to find the leaks before we send it back to production for the tightening up. Well, we don't do that. We do the feel. Don't you know? You get your hands in there, you feel that leak. The Air Force expects that. We expect that. So cut that stuff out. And he took the paper up, threw it away. I said, this is a good start. I can see my resume when I move out of here to the next job. But the guy that ran the test cells, the block of test cells, explained to him what I was doing and how well it worked. And I understand they tried it, only with these little feather dusters, you know. You just, over the top of it, all of a sudden you see this thing puff up whenever we found one of these small leaks. So anyways, I got out of there safe. And then after 3 months, a bunch of us were moved up to the Hermes Missile Project in Schenectady. Now, Schenectady is a great place. You've heard of this old joke about, if you win in the contest, you get 1 week in Schenectady. If you lose, you get 2 weeks in Schenectady. Well, it was pretty darn accurate, I'll tell you. It not only was kind of a very old city, not very clean, but it just didn't have any appeal whatsoever. And there was nothing in there. Everything was over in Albany and that way and so forth. But anyway, it was colder than heck. We had one morning when we were going to work 15 below zero. And so I think of that every once in a while, and then I say, how fortunate I am to be down here in this land down here. But anyways, we were in a testing lab up there, and we were testing all the components that went into the Hermes missile. And I'll get to the Hermes missile in just a minute. But we would test it with air pressure or liquid pressure, or we would high pot it, meaning throwing a lot of voltage over it. There was some acid resistant test, all this type of thing. And we just had a great time blowing up stuff and ruining it. And got to the place where one guy, very smart, started a pool. And we'd have a test to destruction of a turbine, for instance. And we'd all bet in a range of where the pressure was going to get it. And whoever came up with the 15,000 pounds or whatever it was, he won the pool. It got so popular, people were coming from the next apartment over to get into the pool. So, but anyways, while I was there, towards the end of the 3 months, they came and asked me if I wanted to go up to the Malta test station and to act as head of test up there, I would say commercial test, but the production test up there. This was a test station we had up south of Saratoga where we're running the actual rocket engines. And this is kind of an over-glamorization because very few times did we have the whole rocket up there. We had all the internal workings and we could run it as a rocket, bolted, of course, to the Aaron framework and so forth. But when a production unit came up, a turbine, a pump, or whatever, it was my job to make sure it was received properly, logged in, put onto one of these test stands, and run, and then all the results sent back down to the engineers in Schenectady. It was a great job. It wasn't a full-time job, but there's a lot of top-notch scientists up there working on other aspects of missile engines, rocket engines and so forth, solid state, shutter engines, a lot of other things like this. And I had a lot of time to go around and they would talk to me, explain what was going on. And one of the things I saw immediately was that the Germans were absolutely amazing. If we'd given them another 6 months, they would have had missiles that they could pinpoint anywhere in England. They were that good and that close with those engines and so forth. So we were trying to catch up with them. This thing, let's see. Yeah, there's a missile. It's only about, I don't know why we got an arrow here all of a sudden. There we go. It was only about 25 feet long, tiny, but our first attempt at a guided missile, and it had a mind of its own. The electronics was just really backwards, and they'd fire them and they never knew where they were going to go. And I think you've seen videos of the one that went straight up and came straight down on the blockhouse. Fortunately, it carried no explosives at all at that time. I think the one that was the furthest out was one that took off to go down the White Sands Range turned almost 180 degrees and landed about 9 miles out of a small Mexican town, completely opposite way. But they were learning and so forth. But you can see what they were preparing for. This is part of the White Sands Museum now, but you can see that tower. You could see the size of the stuff that they were beginning to get into, how it would fill that tower all the way to the top up there. So, but I got to jump forward a few years after this. I was back in Schenectady with my family, my two sons. I forget what, I think one was 6 and one was almost five, I guess. And I called up a friend. I said, "You going to have any static tests up there?" And he said, "Yeah." He says, "We're going to have a big one tomorrow night or the next night." So I said, "Can you get me a pass for that service road down inside the works, and so I can drive the family down and watch this at night?" Because it's quite sensational when these things fire off, of course. So we did. On the way up from Schenectady, we stopped at this little drive-in place, got both kids a big bag of popcorn, and they were happy with that. We went up, went down the road, and I said, "Now, you guys stand over here beside the car and just look right up that valley. See those little orange lights flashing up there? Look up that valley up there." And I said, and pretty soon you're going to see this rocket fire. So they both stood there against the side of the car like this, eating the popcorn, and that thing took off with a flash, and a heat wave came down that valley. Precisely, they both threw the popcorn right into the car. I don't think they missed one kernel. They just went like that, and there it was. So, anyways. Well, the winter I was up there, they announced the creative engineering program, which was one of the many training programs in GE, announced that they were going to take some people into the creative engineering program, which was designed just for that, to develop creativity in some of the engineers that showed some inkling in that direction. So I took the test more as a lark, but unfortunately, I was one of the 24 that was accepted. I don't know how many applied for it all over the company. But so they divided us up. 12 stayed in Schenectady, and 12 went over to Lynn, Massachusetts, near the big GE works over there. And then they went to work on us. And they taught us everything there was to know about creativity and how you create things, how you solve problems, and so forth. I mean, night and day and weekends. We had problem after problem after problem. And in a great extent, it worked. There was some drop out of the class. I think at the midterm, when we all got together back again in Schenectady, of the 24, I think probably maybe 6 had dropped out. They couldn't take it. And it was really rough. They were going to pound it into our heads to make us geniuses, you know. Well, it didn't work in all cases, obviously, but anyways, we that's the way I pictured it. They just put a big vice on our head and kept working all the time. Well, the first year of this was all about theory, about how you create something. And there was a number of different ways. You all heard of cerebral popcorn, where everybody sits around and throws out ideas. There's the opposite of that, where somebody comes in with the most ridiculous solution to a problem, and everybody else tries to rebuild it. And then so on down. There's a matrix system that was too difficult for me to understand, where if you had 3 parts of a problem and you could solve 2 but not the third, but the next guy could solve that one plus 2 other and so forth. You put them all together, shook them all up, and sooner or later there would be one there that had all 3 solutions in it. Well, that was pretty tough. But I liked the serendipity. That was the greatest one. You took the problem and you thought about the problem. And then you thought about it some more. And then you thought about it through dinner time. And you thought about it in the evening. And you thought about it all night. And you thought about it till you're going crazy. And then you doze off. And when you woke up, every once in a while, miraculously, there was the answer. And I'm not kidding you. This is how some of the great inventions have happened. People just get so deep into it, so many solutions are floating around in their head that all of a sudden, without them working on it anymore, it would just all flow together. So anyways, that was the problem. Well, the The greatest creation, though, that I was mixed up in was the arrival of my first child, first boy. And my wife, who was expecting probably in about 3 weeks or something like this, and I had a bridge party one night, about 11 o'clock. After the party broke up, she says, I think I'm having, a contraction. I said, no, it's not time. Go to bed, go to sleep. No, I think I am. It was on a December night, miserable, a sleety rain, freezing and so forth. And she says, I am, we gotta go. So off we went. And we went out to night, this was in Boston. We went out to what is now 95, in those days it was 85. We went down there was hardly anybody on there. Several cars had already slid off. We just kept on going. And finally she says, the baby's coming, what do I do? And I said, you're asking me? She says, yes, I don't know what to do. Nobody trained us, about a baby. I said, I can't pull off. I'd never get back on with the ice and so forth. And I said, well, finally, I said, turn around on your knees. And so she did, and that's the way the baby was delivered. And we got to the hospital, which was quite a ways down, and I ran into the lobby screaming, my wife's had a baby in the car and so forth. So several people come running out, and they couldn't figure out how to get her out of the car. She and the baby are attached, see. So finally, one of these little gals, what do they call them, pink ladies or something like, trainee, she says, dummies, pick them both up at the same time. And so this hulking orderly comes out and does just that, picks her up and the baby and puts him. So I go park and I go into the hospital and I go rushing up to the section where they should be, and I don't see any sign of them. And I said, what's happening? Well, they're out in the hallway. I said, out in the hallway? And she had a baby. Why is she in with all the doctor? And says, it's an unclean birth. We can't put them in the nursery. We can't put them in a room with anybody else. So I said, well, what'd you do with them? She says, we just stuck them out in the hallway. So the first night, and within the first couple hours, I was able to sit there and hold my wife's hand and hold the baby and so forth. So it was a great experience. But and I was awarded a degree of primitive obstetrics, which thank God I've never had to use again. So, but anyways, we at the creative engineering program. At half year or half the program, the summer between the two sessions, we all were sent out to some other division for an exposure to manufacturing. And I was sent to Allentown, Pennsylvania. Allentown, Pennsylvania is where they made toasters and waffle irons, and they were getting ready to make percolators. Well, they were making toasters, the toasters at $8,000 a week. I said, 8,000 toasters a week? Where do they go to? Well, they said there's 22,000 marriages every week, and there is 1,100, or not, I think it was more than that, about 6,000 or 7,000 divorces every week. And I said, what's the divorces got to? Well, when you split up, you can't split the toaster. So somebody's got to have the toaster. So, but anyways, so it was quite an interesting job. I was involved in automation and involved in a lot of things like that, learned a lot about manufacturing. It was an epiphany to me because at that point I decided I wanted to go into manufacturing engineering, not straight engineering. I wanted to be in that area between the engineered product or the engineering department and the manufacturing floor. And but one of the things they gave me to do was up in the engineering department to take care of complaints that came in. So up I went, and they said, there's a new box just came in, a toaster box, and it's coming in from a lady in Boston who's complaining about the fact it doesn't work. So I said, okay, I'll take it. I opened up the box, and I found in there a very smelly toaster that was locked down and couldn't come up. So I just messed around with it, nothing I couldn't do. So I took it in their little shop, and I took it apart. And I found inside of it a fountain pen, well cooked, and it was a Mont Blanc, which in those days was a $100 pen, and it had the ink cartridges all over the inside of it and so forth. So we sent back the fact that that's what we had found, that it was just had been ruined. Somebody had accidentally put it in there, and she wrote a very nice letter back, and she says, "You would think, with all you high caliber, high talent engineers, you could build a toaster that could tell the difference between bread and fountain pens." And I said, well, good point. So I said, we got to do something for this lady because it's that smart. So we sent her a new toaster free. So, but anyways, well, this does not want to work. No, we're out of business here for some reason. There we go. There we go. I just wanted to get Joy over. When we got back to, after the 3 months down there, we went back to Schenectady for the second session of the Creative Engineering Program. One of the first things they did was to send us over to the apprentice machine shop, where they brought all the new guys in that were going to become machinists, and they were going to let us, with our own hands, do some machining and show, and give us a feeling of how difficult it can be and so forth. But this wasn't a real tough program or tough challenge. They gave us each a big hunk of metal, anything, and they said, out of that, now cut a 1-inch cube and make sure it's plus or minus 0.06 of an inch on either side, square, perfectly square. So we all went to work on that as we could with the time we had and so forth. And I couldn't make the cube. I really did. I mean, it looked like a cube, but if you measured it, you'd laugh and so forth. So I went back to where I had been assigned to work, and there was a shop there, and I said to a fellow I knew, I said, "Can you make me a 1-inch by 1-inch by 1-inch cube with this?" "Sure, no problem." So he turns this up, turns me a nice cube. I didn't dare take it in and say I did this, but I took it in and showed this old gentleman, a German man, was still English speaking all the time, like this. And he says, I said, I couldn't do this very well, but I got this one made. And he said, "Well, you're supposed to make this. You're never going to be a machinist to understand if you don't make this." And I said, "Well, I did learn how to delegate." And he said, looked at me, he says, "Mr. Warner, you should go into sales, not engineering." And so I did, really. I drifted in there with time, because as you get higher up in management, as you all know, you spend all your time selling ideas and selling people on this and selling people on that and so forth. So, Joy, I don't know, am I doing this wrong or something? There it is. Why don't you sit down over here?
While you're talking, I'm going to put a new battery in there.
Oh, a new battery, okay.
I'll put one in.
That was the end of the Hermes missile project, the batteries, the A batteries and the B batteries and so forth. Well, anyways, at the end of the training program, the creative engineering program, those that graduated had a pick of jobs all over the company. There was openings for all of us. And I looked at several of them. In fact, I came down to Greensboro, North Carolina, where they made electric blankets in the middle of a hot wave. And I said, "What is this? Doesn't make a bit of sense." I said I would come all the way down and live in this horrible heat and so forth to make electric blankets. They don't even use them here. They don't even know what they are. And so that was one job I got rid of. But anyways, where are we?
Right
Where are
here.
we now? Okay.
Now I'll try it.
Now, okay.
Do you want to go to the next one?
I want to go backwards here. There. Whoop. This is touchy.
Yeah. So you want to go back just one?
No, I'm all set right there.
Okay.
So, yeah, I think that's okay. So, anyways, I took a job that I had been in temporarily inside at the Schenectady Works in the automation lab. GE had started a new program inside the company to help all the manufacturing facilities everywhere in the different areas where they might need help, and to provide the most advanced technical information also. I worked in the packaging development, I worked in process development, I worked in at several areas like this. The one I liked the most was where they had set up this big shop to make automation equipment as an example to the various departments. And we'd get a job and we would bring it back, build this equipment, take it down, install it, and then photograph it and so forth, and send it all over the company so that people would get an idea about how to do this. And that was very neat when you had a multi-product setup where you were making 8,000 toasters a week, or you're making 15,000 refrigerators a week and so forth. But for a lot of the company, maybe even more than half, probably more than half, it didn't work too well because you were handling huge pieces of metal and turbines, motors, all this sort of thing. And so they split off part of that group to begin to look at the rest of the company. How did we build equipment that would help them? Well, they asked me to run that group because I guess I was the most far out nutty guy that they had in the area, and that's what they were looking for. So we went to work in that area, and one of the things that we discovered was that they didn't, and the rest of these companies or divisions, they didn't have that mass production type of flow, but they drilled millions of holes. Now you say, well, that's silly. What do you mean? Every product, no matter how heavy, had holes drilled in it. And so we said that if we can automate that to some extent, that would be a big help. So I'm going to push this button and we'll look at one of those machines. There. Now this is a very simple diagram, but this was the first one we built. It was called a baseboard drilling machine. That's a big piece of plastic laying on that table. And it's part of a control panel, like you see pictures of steel mills and so forth with these big control panels. You open up and they got all kinds of relays and everything else inside. They're all bolted to these big sheets of heavy insulated plastic. And in this particular case, it was down in Roanoke where they built this type of thing. They have these boards, and they would spend days and days laying out the board manually and then drilling all the holes all through this. Well, what we did was connect an engineer up in the office where he was designing this and laying it out through, I think it was really punch cards instead of the indicated mag tapes, to a machine that had this red head up there that could move back and forth, X and Y, anywhere on that sheet and drill a hole. And so it was quite an accomplishment because it was the first time when anybody that we knew had connected through engineering, through the computer, to actually doing this type of thing. So anyways, as a rule of nature, when you build one of these machines in location X and you move it to Y, it doesn't work. It just, I don't know why. I mean, it cannot work. No matter what you do, the foundation you put it on, so forth, it's a period of time that you have to sweat over it and make it work. This machine was working fine, except it went into hunting. Now, hunting means that red spindle there, the drill, would come to its location and then it would hunt, and it couldn't find the final location. And so we were working on this like mad. It was probably, without exaggeration, 2 o'clock in the morning because it had to go into production. They had taken the rest of their layout away, so this had to work. So about 2 o'clock in the morning, there, and the people were getting a little red around the collar, and the engineers were calling the manufacturing people dumb and so forth and so on because they didn't do this and didn't do that. And then right in the middle of it, down the hallway, comes this guy, I mean, Mr. Redneck, if I ever saw one, singing away at the top of his voice, pushing this trash can container, rattling away, turned into our area, right through the whole bunch of people. There's probably 5 or 6 there. I think he must have hit 1 or 2 like this, and then stopped and started getting the can off, changed the can. And the guy that was the head of production, he came under in a way of many levels. He says, "What are you doing? Why don't you think?" And the guy looks at him and he says, "Think? If I had to think, I'd ask for more money." And so we kind of broke up over this, and it kind of broke the tension. And just then the head of manufacturing, which was there to observe what we're doing, walks away and he says, "That's my problem. I haven't paid you enough to think. Now get this damn machine working." And we did a couple hours later and so forth, and it worked. As far as I know, it's still working if they were still doing the same job down there. But it was just a funny thing that happened at the right time. So, well, in our lab up in Schenectady, we built a robot, the first robot that was designed to move parts around in and out of a machine and so forth. There were other robots that had fixed motions, couldn't be programmed, could change from one to another piece of equipment or anything like this. We called it anti-MAME because we never knew what it was going to do next. And it would make up its own mind to follow a routine for a while and then change. So, but it was back in the days when these little lights we have all over everything, the LED lights now, were not available. They had a light bulb that had an element for each figure in it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 to 0, or A, B, C, D, and so forth. Each one of those things cost about $300. And so when you built them in a machine, you hoped and prayed that they would work and so forth. And we, as far as the sensors as to where the elbows were, the wrists were, and all that sort of thing, very, very crude. But we decided that we were going to do this as an example of what could be done and how it could be used. So we finally did get it set up and running. The big guys from New York came through for a tour of the manufacturing lab, and we had to show them this. Now, if you look at the picture, see the dark side? That would be one position of that arm. When it came around to the other side, there's the light side. I just tried to indicate it's just one arm. It would come around, pick up that one on one side, swing around, and put it in the machine on the other side. And there were golf balls, because the golf ball's nice, round, uniform. There's no question about whether the knob is on the top or the knob is on the bottom or anything. So we used golf balls and had a big source of them. So the guys from New York came through, the chairman, and Bob Paxton, who was the heir apparent to become the next president, came through, and they looked at this thing, and they thought it was marvelous and so forth. And I guess Paxton had looked at the machine setting the ball down on that little stand on the left side there. So he's walking out, and he says to Courtney, he says, "If they could just get the damn machine to get the ball out of the hole after I hit it in there," he said, "that would be a pretty good bet." And here we had spent hours and hours and hours trying to get across the fact it was advanced technology. But anyways, that was life. So, so I'd been there for a number of years, and I finally decided, I talked to my boss about I want to get back into production instead of development. So GE Diamond had just been developed, and they had sent it out to Detroit and parked it back of the Carbaloy plant. Carbaloy is a man-made metal, the strongest metal there is, or was at that time. There may have been surpassed by then, and it was needed in the manufacture of diamonds. But as I arrived out there, and I walked down from the main plant where my boss's office was, we came down here, and here was a lot of debris and so forth, construction debris laying all around the plant. And I looked over, and there's beautiful flowers growing down the fence line between the plant and the houses on the far side. And I said, "Bill," I said, what is that for? I said, "Aren't you ahead of yourself? Isn't the decorating committee ahead of the cleanup committee?" He says, "Oh, no." He says, "That's our acid indicators." I said, "Your acid indicators?" He said, "Yeah." He says, "If the acid rain from the plant gets too high, they start to turn brown. So we know that we got to back off a little bit on the acid or boiling inside the plant." I said, "The acid you're boiling?" "Oh," he says, "yeah, that's vital in making the diamonds." And I said, "Oh," and he says, "In fact, it's your number one priority to get the scrubbers on that stack up there so that we aren't raining the acid down." And he says, "The people over there are watching those flowers every day. They know if it turns brown, they're getting acid." So I said, "That's kind of but this was an operation run by a bunch of scientists. And if there's any scientists here, I beg your pardon, but they're not too practical. They get zeroed in on one thing. They don't care about the side effects and so forth." So anyway, that was the introduction to diamonds. Now, bear with me here for a minute. Here's a diamond press ready to run. You see the two arrows? They're two rams. They're coming down from top to bottom, just like this. The gray bumps on either side are just part of a huge carbaloy ring within a ring within a ring. Super strong ring. And the red is a gasket material. And in there, where it looks like pepperoni stacked up, that's precision sliced graphite and nickel plates. The process then proceeds with these two rams being pushed from top and from bottom until you get down to a certain point where and I should also say those rams conduct electricity down through that graphite until it gets hot enough and the pressure gets high enough that the graphite turns the diamonds. But it does it at its own pace. It's not a quick bang, like this. It comes down and moves and moves and moves and moves like this until all the graphite that's going to turn to diamonds is turned to diamonds. And then you take it out of there, and then from there you take it over to and you've got nickel, you've got graphite, you've got some of the gasketing material all mixed together in a mess. You take it to acid, every acid you ever heard of, and you boil it in that. Then you come out of that finally with the clean diamonds. You sieve them down to the different sizes you want, and you're in business. 1 ounce of the diamonds is 142 carats. In those days, we were sold from $3 to $11 per carat, and we were making diamonds like you can't believe. It was flowing out of the place, and they were better than the natural diamonds. We could make them in 3 different types. Again, I risk boring you, but one was to be used in a metal wheel, bonded wheel, metal wheel, one cast into a resin, one on these big wheels that you see cutting up the pavements and so forth. Those were the biggest of the 3 diamonds. So anyways, the gasketing material, I should have pointed that out, I guess, again here. Let me see. Whoops. There. Whoops. See, the gasketing material, which was thick and so forth, is now squeezed way down. The gasketing material was one of the biggest problems they had in learning how to make diamonds. It had to stay in that press even though we were pressing down almost to 1,000,000 pounds per square inch. And we were heating up well over 3,000 degrees to create what was down in Mother Nature created when it made the diamonds natural. We had to keep that mess in there and not squirt out. And they finally found a gasketing material that would hold it in there. And the gasketing material was a stone, a natural stone called Wonderstone, found in one place in the United States, and that's up in northern Minnesota on an Indian reservation that you're not allowed to go on to. So we went up and we talked to the chief. The chief would talk to us with probably 4 or 5 cases of good scotch. I mean, it's just, that was the way they did it. If you wanted to talk to him, that was what it was. Then you would explain what you wanted, and they would then go out and hack out these blocks of this Wonderstone, which we would then turn into a precision gasket there. And he said, just like that, white man crazy, pay good money for rock. And they just went out and dug it. But you never knew when he was coming back with it. And so anyways, we had to do it that way for a while. Then it was discovered down in South Africa. And of course, De Beers is down in South Africa. That's a problem right there. And we don't do business with South Africa back in those days at all. That was another problem. But somehow we did do business with South Africa. Anything critical in the United States was okay to buy out of South Africa, even though it was illegal. So we bought Wonderstone out of South Africa. And I remember one meeting in Geneva with the people from down there arranging for shipping and so forth. And the boys in the blue suit always with us whenever we were talking to South Africa. And we had this meeting, got things straightened out. Nothing was ever signed, couldn't sign it. Nobody wanted to sign it, in fact. So we left, and I said this one fellow from whatever it was, State Department or CIA or something like this, I said, that was a great meeting. He looked at me, he says, what meeting? And that ended it right there. So it was never, went any further than that. But anyways, we had a nutty professor type engineering manager out there, and he was a renowned crystal grower. he could take many things and grow crystals out of it. One of the things he did was salt, and I could see it many times. He'd mix salt in warm water, keep dipping this or dripping the salt in there until that water became super saturated with salt. And then just at the right time and the right temperature, he tapped bang, that'd be one big crystal, just like this. It was a miracle. So he would do these. People would come in and say, well, what about the big diamonds? Can't you make the big? Oh, he says, he'd turn around to his secretary and he'd say, Marie, bring in that last run where we had those bad crystals. And she'd come in with this little tray, and on this tray was all the little black crystals and these couple of these big ones, real big. I mean, 20 carats and so forth, beautiful crystals. And he says, well, what do you do with those? He says, well, we break them up. We can't use them big. He'd get out this little hammer, hit that salt crystal a couple times. Everybody would, God, the diamond, 40 carat diamond you're spending. Well, he never explained to her what it was. So so anyway, but that was the question. How about the big ones? Can you make the big ones? Where are the big ones? And so forth, which we couldn't do, of course. But anyways, now, here we see us lowering a school bus into a hole in the factory floor in the diamond plant. Now you say, why in the world would you do that? Well, if I tried to explain the size of a supersized diamond press, you wouldn't know what I was talking about. But it was just about as big as a school bus, only fatter in all directions. Huge thing, 1 million pounds per square inch. It could not bend or anything else like this. So we had to get a, I showed you that instead of the actual press itself. And so the time came to bring these presses in, which were made out in Chicago. And I might add, they were made out in Chicago, and they were all dimensioned and so forth. Everything was figured out just exactly right, how we were going to mount them on the freight cars, because they were the double length, the double strength cars, so forth. And then, but without really thinking about it, they put a big wooden skid down one side of it for handling. The skid was about 1 foot by 1 foot. That added 12 inches. You say, well, so what? Huge thing, you were going to move it? No, it took 7 weeks to route that around the railroad lines to find bridges that were high enough for that thing to go under. And so it took 7 weeks to get there. Then when we got them to Detroit, and we were ready to take them down the service road back at the plants, no, the city says can't do that. Frost's not deep enough in the road. So we had to wait another 3 or 4 weeks until the frost was deep enough so we didn't break the road up with a huge weight. When we got it to the plant, the problem was to put it down into this hole. It was almost 2 stories deep down in there, and it stuck up on almost 2 more stories above the level of the floor level and so forth. And if Rock Rowley's here, he knows what I'm talking about. These riggers that do this type of thing are absolutely amazing. There's 2 types of them. Ones that are bigger than the biggest guy you ever saw, and they lift up things you can't lift up. And the others are like little ferrets. They're all over the place, putting cables here and everything else like this. And nothing stops them. Well, they slid that press in on its back till they got to the edge. And then through holes we had to cut in the ceiling, they brought their cables down through, attached it to this thing, and then tripped it, gradually pulled it up to where it began to break over the edge in there. Then everything started to happen and straightened up, went right down on the 4 huge bolts that held it to the floor. It was absolutely amazing. But if we were making a lot of diamonds before, when these things got going, we were making them in the size of cans almost as big as oatmeal cans. We were really pouring it out at that point. So, but then I went to Allis Chalmers, a former boss of mine, GE and so forth. Went over there. Allis Chalmers was trying to go through the same thing GE went through, decentralization, break it up into small manageable parts and so forth. And so he taught me into going over there and becoming manager for their farm equipment. So it was like moving from diamonds to manure spreaders, but I don't think of that too much. But the problem was basically, and nobody could see it to begin with, was the current president, Willis Scholl, was against all this. He had been with that company for 100 years. They had done it the same way for 100 years, and he just did not want to change anything at all. So when you talk to them about this big effort to break up the company and find, you know, new ways of running things and so forth, well, yes, we're going to, if it works. Well, maybe if we can only make this thing do what it's supposed to do, you know, and so forth. He was doubting it right from the beginning. So I went in and we really, I mean, you could walk around there and trip over cost reduction opportunities. And it'd been a company hadn't done anything different in so long that it was just amazing. In fact, I used to have a little measurement. I'd walk through a shop and I would keep track of people that were working and people that were walking, sitting, talking, and so forth. And if you get one where people are 80% working and only 20% sitting around, that's pretty darn good. Well, in the tractor plant, which is right there in West Allis, where Allis-Chalmers headquarters is, I counted 40% of the people working and 60% sitting around and talking. You know, you couldn't do anything except improve the operation. And so we beat the first year's budget by so much. The president, Alice, got up in front of the awards night and he says, "You guys have somehow scammed us. I don't know how, but it's the last time you're ever going to do that." And I said to myself, we got problems. I mean, if this guy stays in that job and keeps, you know, that type of attitude and so forth, we haven't got much of a chance. But anyways, there's a diesel, good old diesel Allis-Chalmers tractor, and you really made good tractors, high quality, very high cost, but high quality. But before I get into the demise of the company, I talk about going out to see the big farm equipment show in the middle of Iowa. And this was a big thing. I'd never realized that all the manufacturers, all the seed people, all the fertilizer people, everybody had big displays out there. And so there was hundreds and hundreds of people out there, out in the middle of a cornfield, beaten down cornfield somewhere in Iowa. And so we drove out, and as we drove in to get down closer to the where all the displays were and so forth, there was these great big rows of what? Airplanes. Every farmer had an airplane. I could never figure that out. They're all supposed to be dying, starving. Everybody had an airplane. But anyways, we went on to the show, and then one of the seed companies, I think it was, had a little buffet, a lunch, and some entertainment. And if you'll bear with me, I'll tell two jokes that the entertainer told. And I want you to notice the difference in the two jokes. The first one was about a Rotary Club where the entertainer was telling a joke, or going to tell jokes and so forth. And he started off and he says, "All right," he says, "all you young bucks out there who might get a little loving tonight, raise your hand." "Yay, no, a bunch of them." And everybody else is giving him the business. No. "All right, how about every once a week?" Yeah, a few of them. And then once a month. And he says, finally, once a year. Yes, one guy, yes. And he says, "Why are you so excited?" He says, "Tonight's the night." So that was a good joke, and it got a pretty good response. And then he told, after that, he says, there's two old farmers that were going to go down to Omaha and going to go to a convention of some sort. And he says, one said to the other, says, "You know, this will be the first time I'm out of town, away overnight, years." And the other guy says, "Me too." He says, "Well, why don't we live it up tonight?" And he said, "Really do something wild when we're down there." The other one says, "All right, what are we going to have? Do?" He says, "Well, let's have 2 cups of coffee after dinner." And the place went nuts. But that was the farm attitude. So I loved them. They're really great people. I used to love talking to them and so forth. I talking to one of them one day, and I said, what do you find the most challenging or complicated in farming?" He says, "Dealing with the government." I said, "Dealing with the government?" He says, "Yep." He says, "I'm on 4 plants right now." He says, "They're paying me to produce more corn. They're paying me to produce less soybeans. They're paying me to take some property out of production, and they're paying me to clear some new property so I'll have more room for production." He says, "You try to balance all that," he says, "it'll drive you nuts." But he says, they're paying. He says, "Nobody cares as long as we get the money." He had an airplane, by the way. So, Now, back to Willis Scholl and the president of the, are we running on time? No? No? Okay. Back to Willis Scholl again here. He called all the high executives in West Allis, where the headquarters were, into his office one day. There wasn't hardly room to stand, all of them in there. And he explained to us the story about how he was across the road on the bridge, and he saw this girl that he recognized worked in one of the offices near where his office was. And she was just walking around and she was talking to people as she went, and she got a coffee and she went on. And he told about how he followed them sneaking down the hallway, here, there, and everywhere. And he says, and he told all these executives, that's what we've got to stop. We can't have these people just wandering around the hallways like this. He's running a multi-billion-dollar corporation. He's got people all over the world, and he's out tracking down the clerks in the hallway. So that was an indication of it. Another thing he did real quickly was the tractor shipping yard was right across the street from his offices. He drove by it every morning. He called up my boss one day, and he says, Wes, there's way too many tractors out there. You've gone crazy with inventory. Well, it was shipping season, spring shipping season, and the dealers came in and picked their tractors up there. So anyways, he called me, and I said, all right, we'll take care of that. So I called the guy running the plant, and he says, don't worry about it. And the next day, there was hardly any out there. And he'd moved them somewhere else, I think over to the fairgrounds. But anyways, he said, we'll take care of it. He did. The day after that, Willis Scholl called up my boss, and he says, you don't have any tractors out there. How are you going to ship tractors if you don't have any tractors out there? Well, it got crazier and crazier, and the batteries run out already. There. I won't go through this list with you, but these are orders that came down from his office one after the other. A 15% reduction in receivables. That's okay. That's marketing's problem. They got to get the money back in. A 20% reduction in inventories right in shipping season. You know, it was impossible. And then a 10% reduction in hourly payroll, starting with the most senior people. And well, we started picking out some people and to get rid of. And the chairman this time calls my boss, and my boss comes in. He says, Bob Stevens just called down. He says, you've let Joe Blow go. You've released him. And I said, well, that was the order. We were trying to meet some of the order. He says, he has been the leader of the Allis Chalmers Band for 33 years, and we can't let him go. And so then Bob said something that opened the door up for us. He says, you must look at each one of these people, be very careful that they aren't essential to the operation before you let anybody go. So we just continually ignored all the rest of it. We picked out those people that should be let go and just forgot all about the rest of it. But anyways, it went on and on and on. It just got ridiculous down there. But the saying came up, if the boat is sinking, then drill holes and empty the bills. The problem came out finally. One of the divisions, the mining equipment division, was in deep trouble on a major contract, losing money right and left. And Willis Scholl was going to squeeze it out of the rest of the company and ruin the operations. And he did a great job. The company broke up not long after that, split up. Fiat, a couple other places bought up some of the product lines. And I guess I better stop there. Maybe I have to stop there, huh? Well, anyways, I guess just 1 minute in summary, if I can. I went from here to Colt Industries, and that was a great company. I mean, I have never seen or heard of a company run any better. They were so concerned about the people, not to where they gave away things and made it soft and easy. But if you performed, my God, they made sure that you got recognized and you got paid for that. And they had a system that would make anybody work night and day to make sure budget was hit because of the income that you could make. In fact, at a plant level, a man could double his salary by being not much, 10% over the budget. If he went to 25% over the budget, he could triple his salary. Never heard of anywhere else. And I want to tell you, you had a lot of people that worked like crazy to do that. And so But I guess I better stop.
Thank you, Ed. That was terrific. You have to come back and tell us about Colt Industries now. Part 2.
I just forgot.
Yeah, we'll do it some other time. Let's give him a great round of applause. He did a terrific job.
Thank you.
Next month in June, we have Dick Wiles. He was a colonel in the Army. He'll tell us his story. I think it's June 13th. So we'll put that on the calendar. And we're still looking for future speakers. I'm looking around the room, I see a lot of people want to speak. Just come to see me, please, and we'll schedule you. Right, Leo? All right, thank you for coming. Have a nice evening.